Hello everyone, hi. My name is Federico. I am lead site reliability engineer, DevOps at Curve. Where basically, spend 50% of my time doing DevOps, doing infrastructure management, production, that kind of stuff. 50% of my time is explaining what site reliability engineering means and my colleagues. But yeah, there it is. So Curve is a fintech startup. We have a card, basically we're issuing a card, and on this card you can load all your debit and credit cards, and you can pay with this unique card. It gives you some advantages. You can get good exchange rate abroad. You can get very nice notifications in the app. You can concentrate everything in this app and pay via this credit card. For this audience, the most important thing is that we are a fintech startup in London, and we have compliance, we have auditing constraints as well. So this is real for us. Curve is real thing. It's not magical. It's not like unicorn and rainbows. It's actually work with a lot of people. Some of my colleagues are here now. It's just real work. So, but disclaimer, so my talk applies to startup. Does not apply to very large companies or large organizations. It's really about startups. Really about, all this fintech startup, fintech movement in London. It's pretty much about us and about what we are doing at the moment. And spoiler alert, I was told keep the tension high, everyone. So if you're following me, I can tell you with my crystal ball some tips about Game of Thrones. So follow me. Okay. So what this talk is not about, this is not about super technical talk about obscure settings in the Linux. It's not about this. It's an actual page. It's not about that time in which I was told we have one small error. We actually have 25 million errors, but small problem. And it's not about the time in which we, like AWS, had a very high error rate, like 100% very high error rate. But that's not about that. This talk is about optimism. This talk is about change that is happening. I mean, I'm kidding about this, but it's actually happening. So we were moving, we are realizing this. We are moving from a world in which system administrator are here, then DevOps engineer, then Lambda is here, and then we kind of what is happening next. So I'm going to tell you what we're trying to do at Curve in this space. Because we clearly have an evolution if you think about it over time. We started from system administrator in the years, we moved to DevOps, and we're all doing DevOps, we're talking with our developers, we're working together, better solution. And then we're going to managed services that kill DevOps. Because, people are afraid. Because there are a whole new set of skills here. There is Lambda that did not exist 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Lambda is an actual thing in which you can have a developer. There deploys code. So fear is among us, if you want, in a certain way. People that have been in networking for 25 years, or people so-called office administrator, they're now afraid because you need to code. You cannot, get over it. You cannot just not do it. So serverless is here. And for a company, things will be amazing. So who here is using AWS Lambda or any serverless? Okay, so everyone. So everyone knows that. I'm a developer, I get my code, I put it on Lambda, and things will be amazing. Because Lambda is perfect. It really is amazing. You get a piece of code, and you give it to someone, it will run it, it will take all the operational constraints that you used to have, and it will just do it. It's just amazing. It's just the best thing ever. And you don't need a master coin. It's super cheap. Lambda is 6 cents per a million invocations. 6 cents per a million API calls. Is unbelievably cheap. It's really unbelievably cheap. And the main constraint that people refer when I say to Lambda, but is event-based. So, I call an API and Lambda replies on the backend. But there are a million ways to hold state on Lambda. So it's just very good. It's the right thing at the right time. In the years of microservice, I can just take one smooth thing, give it to AWS. AWS will run it for me, will look after deployment, will look after everything. It's just really good. It's just your code, your business problem, that's it. It's fine. It's 99, it's 5 nines SLA. It's just there. It's perfect. So we moved from a world in which worked fine in dev and is an ops problem now, to a world in which, in fact, worked fine in dev, AWS problem now. Not my problem, AWS now. But there is a problem, is that I don't believe it works. I don't believe it works because if you're a developer and you give your code to your operations team in-house, their main concern is to run your software and run your code. If you give it to AWS, the main concern with AWS is protect the platform. So if you misbehave, if you're a developer and you misbehave because you're creating the code that starts doing weird things, allocates a lot of memory or that kind of stuff, your operations team will come to you and will say, your code is not behaving as we want it to behave. Can you fix it? Can we fix it together with DevOps? Let's fix it together. But AWS will throttle you. AWS will protect the platform from your misbehaving. And when you're AWS, you don't really know your neighbors when your code is deployed. So if you have these noisy neighbors, people doing a lot of computation, your code can be affected, and your runtime that used to take, I don't know, half a second now takes 2 seconds. So there are constraints on AWS Lambda. Monitoring in Lambda is very hard. Dynamic tracing in Lambda is very hard. And people also started noticing something that is not as cheap as we think it was. 6 cents per million invocation plus the time it takes to run a function and the time and the memory that you need to run the function. At this point, if you do some computations around this, you realize that if you start doing a lot of stuff, an EC2 reserved instance is actually cheaper than Lambda if you keep on using Lambda for computational stuff. So, no Lambda? No. Lambda for me is a great thing. It's a very, very good thing because you can use it for a very specific use case if you don't do CPU computation, if you don't use that kind of stuff. So there was an original article that it was in the 2011 about NoOps. So NoOps is this movement that a lot of people are afraid of because it means no operations. Whether it really doesn't mean that. So it means that I don't want to call my ISP every time I need to connect to the internet. I just take it for granted. And it just means that a developer should not call the operations team every time he needs to do deploy. They should be completely automated or as much as you can. This is really important. Like NoOps means that the operations team is just doing this. And it's surprising how big will be the drive towards Lambda, how big will be the drive towards moving away from an operations team in-house. Because our job is crazy complicated. Because this is the periodic table of DevOps tools. So these are all the tools that we need to learn, from Visual Studio and editors to Circle CI, to Jenkins, to Docker Swarm, to Orchestrator, Kubernetes, Docker, Rackspace. Look how many things. That's a lot of stuff you need to learn. Plus, in our job, it's incredibly hard to find people. Every meetup I've been there, at the end of the presentation, there is someone that says, we're hiring. Every meetup. So you're a world in which you're hiring because getting DevOps is super complicated. It's super complicated because a lot of, breadth over depth, you need to learn a lot of things, a lot of stuff. And there are very few universities in the UK that have cloud computing courses, cloud computing modules, very few of them. So very few people get out of university and they're ready. So it is obvious. You're moving in a world in which you have someone that does a very complicated job. That is very few people that do. The result, salary. The average DevOps engineer is 20% more expensive than a developer of the same age of experience. Is way more expensive. So it's pretty obvious that the drive towards no operations in the companies will become bigger and bigger, and we will need to go there. But when you give your function to Lambda, you're actually not offloading the operational concern. You're giving your function to Lambda, but those concerns are still there. Lambda will not take them on you, and it's counterintuitive, but the developers must be much better at operations than what they need to do before. So if the operations team is just not there following everything, your developers need to be better at doing operations in a way. So at Curve, we're trying to address this, and we're trying to, create a good environment for developers to work with us, to work with an operations team that is way smaller than the developer team. So what we do, we have production meetings. This is something that is very important, is from Google as well, is doing is super important. Every few weeks, we have a small meeting with the developers in which we talk about the issues that we had in production with their code, and we try to learn from it. It's super important, how to do a rolling deployment. Do you know how to manage this? Or have you seen this? What do you think of it? We learn from it. And it's very important also for the DevOps team to join the feature design early as possible. So avoid having modifying the feature at the end. Developers is creating a feature that maybe affects the scalability of the system. So go there. Go during the Scrum, during the sprint meeting, sprint planning, or when the developer is coding the feature, just do it. We have a production checklist and the meetings for it. So before a microservice, a curve gets to production, it goes through a checklist. This checklist is adapted from the famous one from Susan Fowler in her book. And before we put a microservice in production, we go through the checklist and we make sure that the operational concerns are there. Because when we put a microservice in production, we put it on our platform. So the DevOps team manages the platform. And because developers should not worry where the code is deployed or should not worry where to test the code. It's just that we worry about compliance, we worry about separation of duties because we are financially regulated. So the people that write code are not the people that deploy code. There's a clear difference, and we're doing this. We unburden the distributed system concerns in a way. We unburden secret breaking and caching. We go to developers and say, let's worry about this together. Let's do this together. We do capacity sizing, load testing, and it's very important for the DevOps team to present to the company our SaaS. So to present to the company, what can we do with it? So if we know that Lambda is useful, how is the company supposed to use Lambda? Architect Lambda with us. And also, worry about the platform rather than the infrastructure. Abstract DevOps infrastructure. Kubernetes is the logical choice. GoKit and Logras, are libraries that we tell developers to use. We work with developers to work them because we have those concerns and we tell developers how to use them. But at the end of the day, we want guided ownership. It's clear that we will move towards this. Our developers are on call for the microservices they manage, where they can put that, when they can put on call. So if you do not have compliance problems around that, put your developers on call. Put them in charge of their microservice, in charge of their system. And where you have compliance concern, use a chatbot. If you want to stop a queue somewhere and your developer cannot go to the node because it's a compliance problem, use a chatbot. The chatbot can go to the node and can stop RabbitMQ or can stop Kafka and do whatever he wants in that queue. We have floating engineers, in which if you have a team of 5 people, you have one guy that for this week will look after all the bugs that he has, all the interrupts that he has, and will protect the rest of the team so that he can continue coding. And give the best monitoring service that you can give to your developers. So give Outlier, give Datadog, give New Relic, give everything. CloudWatch, we have the LK stack. We have so much monitoring on it that our developers in time are just like, okay, what should I look for? Because this is very important. This is the main goal. Keep developers there. And our culture also, we're a small startup. We see a lot of value in runbooks, but our culture is just like, okay, so postmortems over runbooks. When we have a problem, we write a postmortem and we review it during the production meeting rather than creating runbooks for people that are very hard to manage and there is value, but we're a startup, we're moving very quickly and keeping them up is very hard. And then there is a point that is an interesting point. I really believe that we should give developers that are in charge of the operations of their microservice SSH access to the production nodes. It's a difficult point, but I really believe that there is value in that. They are the ones that need to run it. So what the SRE team does, the SRE team cannot stay away from the code. So we work with the code, we do code reviews, we look at the database migration, for example, because we likely have more experiences with databases than developers. So we look at the migrations. Is this migration good? Is it bad? Let's just look at it together. How can we improve it together? Or maybe we're talking about it in a meeting. We can do this. And it's always about this. If you have a developer that comes to you and says, oh, I have a new microservice, I want to use a very cool database. What can we do with it? We're looking at the microservice and the database, but we're also looking at the library that we have with a microservice. Because if the database is perfect, but the library is bad, that doesn't mean anything. Let's just choose something together and code in the library. And if you're providing a platform, if you have a Kubernetes platform that you're giving to your developers upon which they can load their code, that's super easy. Run one or more microservices on the platform, own it. For us, we created a microservice called QAutomator that we use a Curve because Curve is processing transactions that have a life cycle, and we're using QAutomator to do some testing of these transactions and doing some chaos monkey, basically, playing around a bit with what happens if we fail in this life cycle. So run the code there and provide business value. Because we moved away from the world in which every company needs to have an operations team. These days, small companies, a lot of small companies go without us. 5 days ago, 10 years ago, this would not have happened. 10 years ago, this will never have happened. So if you work in a company or a startup, but also be your company, and you go to your CEO and you tell him, oh, I updated Nginx to 1.12.1, he will say thank you. but that's it, because he has no idea what it is. It's just, So there is zero business value in that. There is zero business value in updating Nginx to 1.12.1. But there are £4 million of business value in preventing a data leak because you updated Nginx to 1.12.1, according to GDPR from May 2018. So always do this kind of thing. Like, present your job, create dashboard, create presentation, prove to the company that you're providing business value. If this word is a word in which we are not super needed as we were needed as before, provide business value, create dashboard, create presentations, make the procedures inside the company as simple as possible. And don't be scared of talking money. If you have a Docker file, like if you change a Docker file that was used to build an application and now from 40 minutes you move to 5 minutes, the Docker file takes only 5 minutes to build, you can go to your CEO or your CTO and tell him, oh, I changed the copy command in the Docker file, now it's amazingly fast. He will say, okay. But if you go to the same person, you tell him, from 35 minutes, the build takes 5 minutes, so I saved 30 minutes of development time for 5 engineers for a week. I saved £1,000 to the company. This sounds much more, so provide business value. It's a different word. And avoid the anti-patterns. So there are some clear anti-patterns that a lot of people carry with them that I believe that we should kind of avoid. So I code in Python, but I'm not a developer. This is the word that I hear a lot. So we're hiring a lot of people at Curve, and we're doing a lot of interviews. And a lot of people come to us and say, oh, I code in Python, but I'm not a developer, I don't have that. So this doesn't really adapt. So get ready to do it. Like, it's a different word, this one. You cannot know code. This really sounds like I used to code in Perl, but I'm not a developer. Is a different word. You need to be a developer. We are all developers. There is very few people of us, I think, these days go and patch and Perl plugs. This is like a different word. Avoid that. And avoid something else. Like, a lot of people who would ever learn NetBeans instead of learning Java? No one. Everyone will learn Java. But here, a lot of people learn Terraform instead of infrastructure as code. So what does it mean? It means that if I start doing Terraform, and with Terraform, instead of clicking on the AWS Management Console, I use Terraform and I do the same thing but quicker, there is some value in that, especially if you have a lot of service. But if I can create a self-service tool in which the developers can deploy a new environment by themselves and run some code on that, there is a lot more value. So the actual value in Terraform is not Terraform by itself, it's the infrastructure as code that Terraform provides. Or stop defining SLAs instead of defining user churn rate. When you talk with your company, marketing, or other parts of the company, saying we have a 99.9% of time uptime is good, but they will be like, okay, thank you. But if you say, I saved 10 people from churning, and this saved £500 for the company, that's a whole different thing. So control instead of collaboration is another very interesting point, because we're in a different year. So the years in which we were, a ground floor and not talking with anybody and just managing our system, our baby, are fully over. Really, we provide a platform. The system is of the company. We provide a platform, and developers should be able to deploy on this platform. This is it. This is a very important thing, because the end goal is to move away from this. And if you think about the evolution in last 20 years, we moved to a world in which 20 developers, 20 people doing operations. And now we go to 20 developers, but we're doing DevOps, so less people. And then we will move away in which I think we will kind of become very, back-end developers on steroids, if you want to. Like very good at operations and onboarding the operational concerns in the company. The value we provide is the culture of sharing and collaboration rather than the code of the configuration that we bring. The end goal is the same. Do not automate yourself out of a job. This is the end goal. Don't get replaced by a vending machine that gives keyboards to employees. Just don't do that, all right? Thank you.